Imagine this: a devastating storm destroys everything around you. Your home, your family, your entire life reduced to rubble in a matter of minutes. You're standing in the middle of the chaos, holding a piece of wood that was once part of your home, while the oppressive silence inside you screams louder than the wind. Now tell me, what would you do? How would you rise after that? DZS copyright DZ. In this video, we explore how a small community faced the greatest adversity of their lives and discovered a strength they never knew they had. Stay until the end to learn how to transform pain into purpose and rebuild not just houses but also lives. The storm may have arrived without warning, but the real battle is fought within us. The storm arrived without warning, like a thief in the night. In a matter of minutes, the village we once knew was reduced to rubble. I was kneeling on the ground, holding a piece of wood that used to be part of my home. Around me, everything I loved was destroyed. The sound of the wind was deafening, but inside me, the silence was even more oppressive. I looked at the faces around me, all expecting something from me, expecting me to have an answer, a solution. But at that moment, I could only think of one thing: you don't control the storm, but you control how you rise after it. I got up, with calloused hands and a heavy heart. The storm had taken everything, including my father. The pain of loss was unbearable, but I knew I couldn't let myself be consumed by despair. There was work to be done, lives to rebuild. And so, I began to walk, one step at a time, through the rubble of what was once our home. Each step felt heavier than the last. The destruction around me wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I saw familiar faces, now marked by hopelessness. We needed a plan, leadership. And somehow, everyone was looking to me, expecting me to have the answers. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed to find a way to inspire others, to show them there was still hope. I remembered words I read once in a book left by a traveler. It is not what happens to a man, but how he chooses to react to what happens. Those words echoed in my mind as I began organizing the first efforts to rebuild. It was only the beginning of a long journey. A journey that would force us to face our fears, our losses, but also discover a strength we never knew we had. And so, with the echo of the stormy silence still ringing in our ears, we began to rebuild, one brick at a time. Before the storm, my life was simple but full of responsibilities. I was a carpenter, dedicated to my craft and my family. I spent my days in the workshop, turning wood into furniture and fixing what was broken. My father, already elderly, was my inspiration and advisor. He always said that wood had a soul, that every piece told a story. The workshop was the heart of our village. Every piece of furniture I made, every repair I completed, was a small contribution to our community. But behind the routine there was constant pressure. The responsibility of supporting the family, of taking care of the workshop my father had built with so much effort. I felt the weight of it every day, and sometimes, anxiety consumed me. Customers came and went, always bringing new stories and challenges. I took pride in my work, but there were moments of frustration. Moments when I wondered if I was doing enough, if I was living the life I truly wanted. The workshop was my world, but I knew there was something more out there, something I hadn't yet discovered. One day a traveler left a book in my workshop. It was a book about Stoic philosophy, something I had never read before. I flipped through a few pages, curious, but didn't pay much attention. One phrase, however, stuck in my mind: "It is not what happens to a man, but how he chooses to react to what happens." At that moment, I didn't know how relevant those words would become. Life went on with its ups and downs. I worked hard, took care of my father, and tried to find balance. But there was a sense of unease, a feeling that something was about to change. And then, the storm arrived and everything I knew was turned upside down. Looking back now, I see that those days in the workshop, those lessons from my father, and even that book left by a stranger, were preparing me for what was to come. The storm didn't just destroy the village, it also forced me to confront my own limitations and discover a strength I never knew I had. The storm arrived mercilessly. The sky darkened and the winds began to howl. Thunder tore through the silence, and soon torrential rain transformed the village into chaos. We ran for shelter, trying to save what we could. I was in the workshop, trying to protect the tools and furniture, but the force of nature was relentless. My father was at home, and I knew I needed to help him. I ran through flooded streets, my feet sinking into the mud, while the cries of neighbors echoed around me. When I finally arrived, I saw the structure of our house collapse. My father was trapped under the rubble, and I couldn't save him. The pain of seeing him go was unbearable. I screamed, but the sound of the wind swallowed my voice. I felt a crushing sense of helplessness, a feeling of failure I had never experienced before. Everything I loved was destroyed, and I didn't know how to move forward. As the storm raged around us, I desperately tried to remove the rubble, but it was impossible. Every attempt seemed futile, every effort swallowed by the fury of nature. Time seemed to drag on, and with each second, hope diminished. When the storm finally began to subside, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. The village around me was unrecognizable. Destroyed houses, uprooted trees, and the deadly silence that followed was deafening. I looked at the rubble of my home and felt a deep pain, a pain that couldn't be expressed in words. At that moment, I remembered the words of the Stoic book. It is not what happens to a man, but how he chooses to react to what happens. Those words echoed in my mind, but I didn't know how to apply them. I was lost, without direction, unsure how to move forward. I looked around and saw the faces of my neighbors, all sharing the same pain, the same loss. We needed a plan, leadership. And somehow, everyone was looking to me, expecting me to have the answers. But I didn't. I was as lost as they were. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed to find a way to inspire others, to show them there was still hope. I remembered the words I read once in a book left by a traveler. It is not what happens to a man, but how he chooses to react to what happens. Those words echoed in my mind as I began organizing the first efforts to rebuild. It was only the beginning of a long journey. A journey that would force us to face our fears, our losses, but also discover a strength we never knew we had. And so, with the echo of the stormy silence still ringing in our ears, we began to rebuild, one brick at a time. The next day, the village was in complete silence. The residents were disoriented, apathetic, trying to figure out how to rebuild their lives. I tried to organize things, but no one seemed willing to help. Martim, one of the residents, openly criticized me, saying I should only take care of my own house. I felt alone, lost. At home, I looked at the Stoic book I had found before the storm. I opened a random page and read, "What is not under your control should not be a source of torment for you." Those words seemed so distant, almost an affront. I closed the book in anger, feeling like nothing made sense. I knew I needed to do something, but the pain of loss and the responsibility of leading the village were overwhelming. I felt incapable of helping others while I hadn't made peace with my own pain. The days dragged on, and every attempt at progress was frustrated by new challenges. Food was running out and winter was approaching. People were desperate and tension grew with each passing day. I saw despair in every Ionia eyes and felt the pressure to find a solution. In a moment of desperation, I sat alone in my destroyed home, trying to find some clarity. I remembered the words of the book again. Righteousness is acting with calm when everyone around you is overcome by chaos. I needed to find a way to apply that, to be the anchor in the midst of the storm. I decided that instead of trying to fix everything at once, I would start with small actions. Small steps that might inspire others to join me. I began working in silence, rebuilding a part of the village alone. Gradually, other residents began to notice and slowly, some joined the effort. I realized my role wasn't to fix everything or save everyone, but to lead by example. I mentally recited, "Master of your emotions, not of the world." Every action, no matter how small, was a step toward reconstruction. And gradually we began to see results. The journey was just beginning, but every small step brought a little more hope. We knew it would be a long road, but together we could overcome any obstacle. And so, with every hammer strike, every brick placed, we began to rebuild not just our homes but our lives. Martim accused me of being selfish, of not caring about others. I felt my anger rise, but I remembered something I had read. Righteousness is acting with calm when everyone around you is overcome by chaos. For the first time, I chose not to react with aggression, but with thoughtful words. I told him, "Martim, we all suffering. We all lost something. But we need to work together. We can't afford to fight among ourselves. We need to rebuild, and that starts with each of us doing our part." I decided to start working in silence, rebuilding a part of the village alone. Gradually, other residents began to notice and slowly some joined the effort. I realized my role wasn't to fix everything or save everyone, but to lead by example. I mentally recited, "Master of your emotions, not of the world." With time, more and more people began to join us. The community, which had been falling apart, began to come together again. Each of us had a role to play, and together we began to make visible progress. It was hard work and each day brought new challenges. But the determination in our hearts grew with every small success. Every wall raised, every roof placed, was a symbol of our resilience. The pain and loss were still there, but now there was also hope and renewed purpose. I realized true leadership doesn't come from grand words or heroic gestures, but from consistent actions and a silent example. Every day I remembered the words of the Stoic book and tried to live by them. It is not what happens to a man, but how he chooses to react to what happens. With each passing day our confidence grew. The village was far from rebuilt, but we were on the right path. And most importantly, we were doing it together. The storm had destroyed us, but it also forced us to discover a strength we never knew we had. It was only the beginning of a long journey. But now we knew we could face anything as long as we were together. And so, with every hammer strike, every brick placed, we continued to rebuild not just our homes but our lives. The most emotional moment was when we faced a snowstorm while trying to raise the first rebuilt house. Even with rudimentary tools and limited physical strength, everyone came together. I took on the role of guide, but with humility I knew I was simply channeling the collective effort. Every hammer strike reaffirmed that we could build something new. The community began to slowly come back together, not because the storm was forgotten, but because every concrete action gave us hope. Finally, the first house was ready. I looked at the faces around me and saw the same determination I felt inside me. The snowstorm was relentless, the cold biting. But no one gave up. Each of us knew this house was more than a shelter. It was a symbol of our resilience, our ability to overcome any adversity. We worked together, side by side, facing the cold and exhaustion, but never losing hope. I saw in every Euro's eyes the same flame that burned within me. The storm had broken us, but it had also united us in a way we could never have imagined. Every hammer strike, every nail, every beam raised was a step toward our recovery. When the last beam was placed, there was a moment of silence. We all stopped and looked at the house we had built together. It was more than wood and nails, it was a testament to our strength and determination. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what came next, we were prepared. Looking at the finished house, I felt a wave of emotions. Pride, relief, hope. We knew there was still much work to be done, but that moment gave us the strength we needed to continue. The snowstorm continued to rage outside, but within us, there was a flame that nothing could extinguish. With the first house raised, the community's morale was renewed. Everyone began to work with more vigor, more determination. Each of us knew that if we could raise that house in the middle of a snowstorm, we could rebuild the entire village. And so, with each passing day, our confidence grew. Each new house raised was a step toward our recovery. The storm had destroyed us, but it had also given us the opportunity to rebuild, to start over. And so, with every hammer strike, every brick placed, we continued to rebuild not just our homes but our lives. It was only the beginning of a long journey. But now we knew we could face anything as long as we were together. And so, with every hammer strike, every brick placed, we continued to rebuild not just our homes but our lives. A few weeks later, the village was already showing signs of recovery. I was working on a new house when a traveler passed by. He praised the surprising strength of our community. I smiled to myself, holding the piece of wood from the storm, and murmured, "You don't control the storm, but you control how you rise after it." With each passing day, the village was reborn. Houses began to rise again, and the sounds of hammers and saws echoed through the air. What was once a scene of devastation now transformed into a symbol of resilience. Each of us had found a new strength, a new determination. I knew the journey was far from over, but every small victory gave us more courage to keep moving forward. Winter was still present, but now there was warmth in our hearts. The storm had tested us, but it had also strengthened us in ways we could never have imagined. I looked at the faces around me and saw hope, determination, and a renewed sense of community. Each of us had a story of loss and overcoming, but together we were writing a new story, a story of rebirth and strength. With time, we began to see the fruits of our labor. Children returned to playing in the streets, families gathered around tables, and life began to flourish again. Each day was a new opportunity to rebuild not just our homes, but also our lives and relationships. I constantly reminded myself of the words of the Stoic book. The greatest battles are the ones we face within ourselves. And when we win, the echo of that victory can rebuild much more than we imagine. Those words had guided my steps, and now I saw their impact all around me. I buried that piece of wood, a symbol of the past, and walked toward the village, where the sounds of hammers and conversations echoed again. The greatest battles are the ones we face within ourselves. And when we win, the echo of that victory can rebuild much more than we imagine. The storm had broken us, but it had also given us the opportunity to rebuild, to start over. And so, with every hammer strike, every brick placed, we continued to rebuild not just our homes but our lives. And as I walked through the village, I knew that no matter what the future held, we were prepared to face any challenge together. Remember, the storm may have destroyed much, but it can't take away your inner strength. And with that, we conclude another story filled with emotion and stoic lessons. So you don't miss the next videos, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, leave a like, drop a comment and share with your friends. Check out an excellent reading suggestion in the video description and in the first pinned comment.